Hello, and welcome once again to the Roundtable, your weekly publishers and editors podcast here at the American Mind. I'm your host, Spencer Clavin, associate editor of the Claremont Review of Books and Nancy Pelosi memorial editor of the American Mind. I am joined this week by managing editor Mike Sabo, and always a treat, by Matthew Peterson, coming to us live from an undisclosed location where he's attending our sheriff's fellowship going on right now, one of our cool new initiatives. And we've got to talk about the shutdown. We've resisted for as long as humanly possible. I think this might be the political podcast in the nation that has spent the longest amount of time not talking about the government shutdown. If this is the longest government shutdown in history, the American Mind is the political podcast that has resisted for the longest amount of time in history talking about an American shutdown. We're on day 42, I believe, as of this recording, which means it'll have gone on slightly longer by the time you hear this, or perhaps not. The reason we decided we finally had to talk about it is because this may be a post-mortem on the 2025 shutdown. It looks as if the government is slowly reaching a deal. The sticking point here, if you don't already know, is Obamacare subsidies. At least that's the item that Democrats chose to resist Republicans on. Back in 2014, when the Affordable Care Act was passed, there were these subsidies that helped some people based on income level pay for premium costs when they bought insurance through the government. These were then increased under the American Rescue Plan Act and laughably named Inflation Reduction Act. You may recall these from the Biden era as part of kind of the ongoing COVID shakeup. And the increases in the subsidies were only supposed to last through 2025. So now, surprise, surprise, an emergency measure taken during COVID is being potentially extended indefinitely into the future. Who could ever have predicted that this would be a request made by Democrats down the line? It does not look like this is going to end up being successful. The continuing resolution that was being that may now be passed does not include extensions of the subsidies. It does reverse the layoffs that the Trump administration put into effect during the shutdown, but that's really a minor concession relative to this larger issue. The bill has now passed the Senate, overcoming it. They got enough votes to overcome the filibuster, which means they needed, I believe, 60 votes. That puts a pin into another issue, which was whether or not Trump was going to succeed in getting an end to the filibuster. He was starting to call for that as a way of moving this shutdown forward and bring it to a close. Anyway, now it's up to the House. Speaker Mike Johnson has already said he's going to convene for a vote, and moderate Democrats are somewhat predictably getting shtick from their more radical colleagues that they have caved to the evil Trump regime. I think the jury's still out on who's going to suffer most for this politically. Polling was not good for Trump, which might have been why he was calling for an end to the filibuster. It looked as if the kind of default blame Republicans as the anti-government party for a shutdown was having some effect. Now, however, that the Democrats are going to be the ones who blink, maybe it looks like things may change. We shall see. The last little point I'll raise before I hand it over to you guys is I had been sort of naively, happily wafting along through the world without much awareness or knowledge of the specifics of this dispute, as I think many Americans were. Eventually, given the nature of my job, I had to look into it, but I was sort of appalled, maybe I shouldn't have been, to learn that really this is only about keeping the government open until January 30th. Do I have that right? Do we have to do all of this again in like 2 months, a little over 2 months, just after Christmas? Um, maybe that's a way to kick it over to the larger issue here, which is like, is this just a thing that we do now? What do you guys think, if anything, has changed after these 42 days of shutdown?
I think, I think this is a thing we do. I mean, it's not really, legislating anymore. I mean, it's special interests, it's lobbyists, it's all kind of things. So I think this is just kind of modern government. Um, you look at the Democrats, I think there were 8 in the Senate who actually voted for this. I think Tim Kaine was one of them, which is a little bit of a surprise. But I think this also shows, too, I mean, I think there are actually some positives for Trump, too. Real Clear Politics, their poll showed Trump's unfavorability numbers actually have decreased during the shutdown, which is kind of interesting to me. His favorability has stayed about the same, about 44%. So that's kind of interesting. And then you do have Democrats, Angus King, senator from Maine, who is an independent but caucuses with the Democrats. He said, this is on MSNBC on Monday, standing up to Donald Trump didn't work. It actually gave him more power. This is Representative Sydney Kamlanger Dove. So she's from California. She also admitted this on MSNBC. Trump got everything he wanted out of the agreement. So that kind of says that, look, Trump actually, I think, kind of won this at the end of the day. The Democrats didn't get, what they wanted with the ACA. It looks like the House is obviously going to be taking this up. And they're basically voting for a resolution that could have passed probably about 40 days ago. I mean, 41, 42 days ago. So I'm not sure quite what they got out of this, other than the only thing that I think that, and this goes into some of our election coverage too, is what solutions does the GOP actually have for healthcare? I mean, housing prices are going up, everything's going up. Healthcare, though, is one of the biggest drivers of all. So what is the GOP plan? Obviously, what the Democrats set in place with Obamacare has been an utter disaster. You look at the names of their bills, and what actually happens is the opposite. It's not affordable at all in any way, shape, or form. But you do look at, I mean, this is a huge opening for the GOP. So I think that they really have to focus on actually offering something that actually benefits Americans, that actually, proposes some solutions and doesn't just, I just can't even think of anything on the table right now. Even Ezra Klein, I mean, was kind of down about this at the New York Times. It was interesting because I read him on Charlie Kirk, and it's like, okay, you think he kind of sorts of gets it. But then you read, his column just, I think, a day or two ago. He said, more than anything else, this is what led some Senate Democrats to cut a deal. Trump's willingness to hurt people exceeds their willingness to see people get hurt. I mean, that is just utterly laughable. It just
I feel the same way about Ezra Klein that I feel about Sydney Sweeney, which is like sometimes she says things I like, and it's
right.
only because she knows that's what's going to get applause. But that's fine.
Exactly. I mean, that's just silly, preposterous. I mean, it reminds me of this HBO special, I think during Trump's first term. Oh, who's the actor? It was Irish guy who played Trump. But it was just, I mean, silly stuff, cardboard cutout things, 2D stuff. And it's like, look, I don't know. How about Trump actually wants to help people? But why did he get elected? Why did people vote for him 3 times? I mean, so it's just silly stuff. But Klein, though, he does point out something. He said, look, the shutdown was built on a cracked foundation. There were Senate Democrats who didn't want the shutdown at all. There were Senate Democrats who did want the shutdown, but thought it was strange to make their demand so narrow. Was winning on healthcare premiums really the winning right fight? So that is interesting. I mean, he does show that, look, I mean, this is a problem for Democrats. How are they going to beat Trump? I mean, nothing they've done has worked at all. The resistance is really not really there at all. Anything that's going to tear, I think, the coalition apart is really internal, from what we just saw the past couple of weeks at some think tanks and so forth. But I think that's where it stands. And I think Trump, came out pretty strong, all things being equal.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think it's kind of like a shutdown. People would ask, what do you think? Is this going to hurt Trump? Is this going to hurt? Which side is going to gain? And first off, I think as we've already established, this government is broken. This is what we do now. We can't pass budgets. We're just raiding the Treasury and doing some poses in front of the American people as we do so. And it's really sad, at the end of the day. But I spent about a third of October in D.C. And I don't think that most of America really was sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, the government shut down. It's happened before. It'll happen again." Life went on. Now, when they started to mess with the planes, right?
Yes, it's really because I personally have to fly to Georgia tomorrow that they decided to fix it because they didn't want me to be delayed, which I appreciate.
No, it's great. It is in fact about you and me because I've
As I always suspected. Yeah,
this is it.
it's you too.
But in the way that works is kind of wild because you do go into these buildings and all the bureaucrats are gone, and then you can see how many political people are in there. At the top, so there's like 3 or 4 people in an office, and then this entire building, multiple buildings like this. In meetings I had, just everyone's gone, and it's the funniest thing, and it's great. Also, if you like to walk around Washington D.C., which you can actually do now without getting killed and slain on the streets, it's empty. So you just walking around looking at stuff is great during the shutdown. But we're in a situation where there's the government getting me right now. I think that we need to acknowledge that this is a broken system, and number one, and then number two, my take is I don't think that either side really won this one. The Democrats control the frame, sort of in the old school mindset of Republicans get blamed, but they were the ones pushing this. And it's not really clear why, other than, I still hold to the theory that this is all about Chuck Schumer not wanting to get primaried by AOC. And what's going on right now with really both parties is these internal wars, as you just mentioned. That's what's going on. And so I don't think it's sort of like a draw and we move on. But I will say about healthcare, that is an extremely important issue. Republicans haven't had a real plan that they've rallied around in years. And I think that the best line about our system is that it's the worst of both worlds. It's the worst of the private sector combined with the worst of the public sector. It's sort of a mess.
Yeah, this was the subject about which Trump famously said that he had concepts of a plan, as I recall. And it is sort of nose goes on fixing this or anything. I have a proposal, which is I know that there's this joke, oh, the government shut down. Did anybody even notice? A lot of this stuff is kind of bureaucratic accretions that don't do anything. And I know that that's not totally true. Like there are things that even small government conservatives want the government to do. Um, but I would like to propose a procedure that goes like this. There used to be a movement, I think it was like 19th century France, where you would take everything you owned and you put it into boxes. And then over the course of 1 year, if you needed something, you would take it out of the box. And at the end of that year, if you hadn't taken something out of the box, you just threw the boxes away. So whatever else was in the boxes was gone. And this was a way of like Marie Kondoing your life, basically. I think we should Marie Kondo the government. I think, at this point, it's easier to count the number of days that the government is is not shut down than it is to count the days of shutdown. Let's just declare a year-long shutdown. And anytime we need a government service, we'll just take it out of the box. And then whatever we get at the end of that is our government. That's our budget, is the stuff that we've used over the course of 1 year. I assume the military will be in there, some amount of like, essential services, emergencies, etc. And then everything else, you just throw the boxes out, and start again. I'm kind of joking, but it does seem like this is where we're at this point, is like the degree of overhaul that is required to root out the administrative state, like reconceptualize healthcare, balance the budget, cut entitlements, right? All these things that have been themes of our podcast forever. This is such a huge lift that neither party wants to take it on. It's a running motif that this is like a kind of a hot potato that they pass back and forth to each other. And the Democrats this time around, it's like everything in the resistance, right? It's ostensibly about some issue that's supposed to save lives or like not keep Trump from killing grandma or whatever, but it's really
people
something
are dying. People
are dying. Yes, and this is a brand new situation. People have never been dying before in the history of the world. Yeah, exactly. But really, it's just
Right.
fight Trump, right? I mean, Schumer got burned last time for not sticking it to the man, and now he's supposed to be like standing up and taking a stand. And exactly like you say, Matt, there's a primary challenge to his left, obviously, within AOC. We're about to talk about the way that reflects larger dynamics within the Democratic Party now that Zohran Mamdani is going to be mayor of New York, etc. Um, but that is all like wildly distant from, I don't know. I mean, Matt, would you say it's like a refounding on this level that has to happen? Like, is that a fair description? And can we just put the government into a box for a year and take out what we need?
First off, I love the government that sparks joy. That would be great.
Exactly. Yes. Hold it in your hand for 1 second, treasure it, and then goodbye.
Maybe even though we think maybe it's on principle disgusting, maybe even a little bit of public subsidy stadiums for a treat.
Yes, right. It's like in the Republic when they say, "Okay, this is the essential city," and then we need to have like some delicacies, whatever. It's a little frippery around the edges. It's fine.
I mean, I think it's a way of conceiving of a refounding, right? It's a good thought experiment, at least, to say, shut it all down. Now let's bring it back. What do we want? What do we don't want? What don't we want? That's a good heuristic. I think that what's really still at stake, and it's been something I've been thinking about a lot in the last 2 weeks, is everything we used to talk about on this show, back in the dark days of the Biden era, and before. These things aren't resolved, people, right? I mean, I think this is how bad things are. Okay. You could make a great prudential case that the Trump administration should not actually try to rip out the core elements of the deep state because of what it would cause right now. And it wouldn't actually further the goal. They should focus on core issues that matter for sake of winning elections, and hope that over time they can build, the coalition builds a better team and works itself up to being able to reform the darker sides of the agencies that, that do control America. So I mean, that's, you can take that as you want, but I mean, that could be a viable prudential argument. What's very clear is that we're nowhere close to even talking about what the plan is to reform some of these agencies. And being honest, right? I mean, that's really where we're at. So, on the one hand, like, yeah, I mean, it's a good thought experiment, good heuristic, and we should start doing this. But then, the darker black pill side of me is sort of like, we're not even talking about. We don't even have a plan. What's the plan to reform the FBI?
Right. We're still on concepts of a plan. We're still on like, step one is, yeah, that's an interesting.
And so, what do you do with that? I mean, this is a problem. So, on the other hand, like, it's not. I'm not like the budget stuff, and there's a prudential argument to say like we just need to keep this thing going because the plane needs to fly while we rehab it. And something along the lines of what you're talking about would be good if Trump decided to come out and start talking that way, like, hey, we're going to look at this, we're going to rethink everything, and start with zero and start saying, okay, what do we need? I mean, that could be very educatory and helpful.
Yeah. I mean, but then you're just back to Doge, I guess, right? I mean, this was what Elon was supposed to do also.
Look, Elon did start to do, and look what happened to Doge.
Right. Exactly. To Doge and to the other initiatives that, as many people pointed out, had already been tried under Reagan and Clinton that were like that.
And I think, too, this would take, I mean, certainly the people that he's put in places are arguably better than they were first term. But I mean, it would need even like, an evolution, even again, like just a whole new level of people. But then even more, I mean, you need a better Republican Party. You need so much. I mean, you need plans, you need people of courage and wisdom. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, this is, and I've been on this too recently. It's just, you need successive administrations. That's what we're talking about. You need 3, 4, 5, Republican administrations, but Republican administrations that actually get it, have the foresight and have the wisdom to actually enact and have the plans. This is certainly a long-term thing, because, what are we talking about right now? A government shutdown, okay, but a government that is like anti-Republican in so many different ways. So actually what you actually want is the current government actually to be shut down and something else to actually come into its place. And that whole process is going to take a long time. I mean, it's multi-generation, if probably we're being honest.
A long-term thing? Would you say even a third term thing? I'm kidding. That's a joke. It's a joke.
At least 4.
Right.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah.
At least FDR,
I was gonna say FDR got 4. No. But right. What you're actually saying is you have to keep winning, right? You have to. Somebody after Trump has to come along and carry the movement forward, and you need like a succession of victories and institutional memory that accretes kind of through those victories. And this is, I think, an excellent point. And also, whether or not you meant it this way, an excellent transition to our next topic. Because the question whether there are going to be successive Republican administrations in the future depends largely on how the elections of the next few years shake out. And we've just had the first one, the first major series of elections across the country, and everybody is talking about them as bellwethers and tea leaves and other common cliched metaphors for indicators of the future. I guess we're here to talk about whether they are and in what ways they are. Some of the slightly less significant ones. First, in Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, I should say, not spam like the meat, but span like the length, beat Winsome Earl Sears for governor. So Virginia has a Democratic governor. New Jersey also has a Democratic governor in Mike Sherrill, who beat out Jack Ciattarelli. And the big one, the top line headline is, of course, Zohran Mamdani, he of the Democratic Socialists of America, won with 50.4% of the vote in a three-way race over Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa. I'm hearing people say that this is a slightly less resounding victory numerically than perhaps had been expected at the upper limits, but it's still pretty healthy, 50.4% to 41.6% for Cuomo, and Sliwa, of course, I guess, siphoning off some of the vote that might otherwise have gone to Cuomo with his 7.1%. California passed its ballot measure to congressional redistricting. It's called Proposition 50. It won with 64% of the vote, and this is basically an answer to what happened in Texas. So people are trying to eke one or two more, I guess in this case, 5 more House seats for their side. And the gerrymandering goes on. There's also the interesting feature of the Latino vote kind of reverting back away from its, it had broken right with Trump. Now it seems to be back. The Latinos seem to be voting more blue, in which case the Texas redistricting itself may not have been the wisest move. It might be what they call a dummy mander, meaning a kind of ineffective attempt to gerrymander. Jay Jones, whom we discussed, having sent murderous text messages about his colleagues, turns out that's not disqualifying. He also won his election, which, as we discussed, was connected to the to the Spanberger one. So yes. Wishing death upon your political opponents is not, in fact, a barrier to public office, in case anybody was wondering. Many, to me, interesting things to discuss here. I guess let's start with Mamdani, whom we've touched on before. One argument is that now Democrats will see this and think, yes, we must run with the radical side forward. This was an energetic, unapologetic, radical socialist who really didn't walk back a lot of his more cuckoo bananas propositions, and will at least try now to put them into effect, is not all that interested in moderating, gave a very aggressive, hostile speech upon his victory. So the Democrats will take from this that really the future is AOC and not Chuck Schumer. Alternatively, you could say, well, New York gonna New York. They've always been like deep blue, and this is kind of one of the most famously dysfunctional and volatile cities in the country, if not the world. Really, what happened with Mamdani is you found a charismatic candidate that fit his locale, and this isn't necessarily going to be successful nationwide. What do you guys think about that? And where, if anywhere, is the Democratic Party going?
There's something to be said about, New York City, obviously being New York City, doing what they're going to do. I think really the next test for Mamdani is going to see how he actually governs. Does New York City just turn into a hellhole, before, say, Rudy Giuliani and, in the 70s?
Have you been to New York?
No, not recently, no. But yeah, so I think that's the test. But the thing is, I mean, again, this is, I think, within the GOP's hands too, as well. I mean, Jeremy Carl wrote a very good kind of election wrap up at the American Mind. And the biggest thing he talked about was, look, they need to actually provide solutions so guys like Mamdani do not get elected. Kitchen table issues. I mean, this was probably what was behind, Trump talking about $2,000 for every American from the tariffs, 50-year mortgages that just came out. That has actually garnered tons of pushback, but it's interesting he's talking about providing something tangible. He understands that retail politics is about providing your constituents with something, and even more than just your constituents. I mean, more than just your supporters, but Americans as a whole. I mean, that's another lesson he learned, obviously, from FDR. I think on True Social or one of the media apps, he showed, FDR 30-year mortgage and then a picture of Trump 50-year mortgage. So clearly he understands these things. But yeah, I mean, this is about economics. This is about, Jeremy says, Mamdani won 59% among those who thought the New York City economy was good, but also 59 to 34% among those who felt they were personally falling behind. You see the same thing with Spanberger. You see the same thing also in New Jersey, too, as well. So I think, Republicans can kind of sit back and they really shouldn't sit back. I mean, they should really look at this, try to find some kind of solutions, especially economically. I mean, I think this really points to the lack of, proposals and solutions on their side. But, this thing I could definitely see it, happen again in other locales where it would be far more surprising. Say in Ohio, there was a poll where Vivek is actually, I think, 1% behind Amy Acton, the Democrat. And Amy Acton is not, Zohran Mamdani, but still, there could be some races coming up where if Republicans are not careful and they could actually lose.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it's a kind of rough and ready thing to say, but it's a truism in American politics that the midterms, you get a little snapback, a little correction from the other party in a two-party system. And I guess, I mean, just really two things is all I have. I mean, number one, I definitely feel strongly about this need to return to the bread and butter stuff. I don't think that, these are the only issues. It's not always the economy, stupid, but there's a disconnect between how sometimes the administration has been talking and focusing, right? And what a lot of people are feeling, which is that, no, things ain't so great. Inflation is still an enormous problem. Somehow we're all just supposed to be okay with that. Yeah, there's some good things that have happened during the Trump administration for sure, but the general trend is kind of insane. I don't know how that goes away. And then you have the homeownership problem and everything else. This is not, this economy needs a reformation. It's a systemic thing. We need a new ways of life that don't accept this. People feel that in their bones. So, that is important for them to revert back to that. That being said, months in this accelerated environment are an eternity in politics. So the idea that it actually made sense to do foreign policy stuff for a while, we're a long way out from midterms, really. So there is plenty of time to turn back around. And I don't think that, I don't think anyone should be like sounding the panicking, but, hitting the panicking button right now. And there's plenty of time to turn back to this. And in fact, you'd want to accomplish what they've accomplished, some of these things first. So I'm not panicked about it, but that is a this is definitely a thing we can't be talking about. Sometimes Trump has a tendency to just not want to take any blame, right? And it's like, no, the economy's great. I'm doing great. I'm like, no one's saying these are your fans. No one's saying that this is on you, buddy. But acknowledge some of the downsides of where we're at, and I think they'll do that. You see JD Vance signaling that he understands that. And then number two is just really simply, I think this is another case of analyzing these elections. What do I know? What does anyone know? But looking at these elections, I see it as a doubling down still. I don't think we can tell like which side is winning, but I think what we can say is that some blue states and some purple states that are, the whole divide is going to happen. So some purple states and blue states are going to blue in. It's not a word. I just made it up.
And blueunate, yes, I think is the correct verb.
Yes, yeah. That sounds better.
A noble spirit embiggens the smallest soul.
and then on the other side, you're going to have a reddening, and you see that with redistricting. My former colleague, sometimes colleague Ben Boychuk, hates the doubling down as an editor. He bans people saying doubling down, but that's what's going on. They're doubling, tripling, quadrupling down both sides, and we can't forget that is an ongoing, accelerated process in America right now.
First of all, Hannikin, really a forgotten golden Trumpism that I'm very glad you've resurrected, because of its complete disregard for any sort of prosody or like it was not. It doesn't sound like anything. It's just panic plus Republican. It's akin to "inbluunate" as a coinage, and I think in redify would probably be the counter, the contrasting verb. But yes, I mean, first of all, the more you're talking about, I'm thinking Marie Kondo the government. Marie Kondo the government. Like, this actually does seem, at least to be, as you rightly put it, like a useful heuristic for thinking about like what are the things that are going to matter to people going forward. And this seems, helpful. I'm glad you kind of situated this in the timeline of Trump's second term so far, with the reminder that we're less than a year in, right? Because there is a level in which, with some issues, Trump has been too successful for his own good. And I would think cultural issues and immigration are really two areas where, like, the problem, it's too much to say it vanished overnight, but from the perspective of your average person walking around, it basically vanished overnight. Like, Trump didn't even have to do anything to affect the vibe shift. Like, the vibe shift kind of came into being with his presidency. It was like birthed alongside his second term. And then all the stuff that happened after about, well, we're going to take trans language out of federal documents, and we're going to like rejigger the Smithsonian, and we're going to, select who gets federal funds based on whether they are in the tank for this stuff. That was all kind of a nice little victory lap that people, I think, the base appreciated, and it was something that probably will have effects. But it was almost icing on the cake. It was like that woke was already, if not over, then in abeyance. And then the immigration thing, again, still many difficult problems to face. And we talked a while back about shakeups at ICE and with Border Patrol. But at the same time, like, the Biden situation was such a disgrace, such an appalling debacle, that all you really had to do is like close the border and enforce the laws as they exist to effect radical change. And that really did, like, we had people writing at the time who had been to the border, saying, look, like, the situation is 180 degrees different. So those are, I think, probably the two Trump successes from early on in this term that stick out in my mind. And the one consequence of them is, like, people forget how loony the cultural stuff was. Like, it evaporated so entirely from the zeitgeist that it's probably no longer so much on people's minds. Like, nobody wants to remember how deranged they got, right? How hideously they acted, how they ruined people's lives over insane claptrap, like made up problems couched in completely unintelligible language. Like embiggen, inbluulate, and panikin are all more sensical words than like systemic racism and, trans penises and male vaginas or whatever, right? Like, but that stuff really did like define the cultural landscape and cause people to lose their jobs, like that. And that's all so gone that when a guy like Mamdani comes along, who just is that, he's sort of, I guess, a Muslim, he's sort of a socialist, but what he really cares about is like underhanded virtue politics to gain control of people's hearts and scare them out of saying what they believe. Like that's sort of his, like the thing that he seems to care about most. That and Israel. Like he really hates Israel. And like, so that whole thing, I think, is now already less disgusting to people because they've sort of forgotten about it and it sort of vanished. And then like there's the other part of this, which is Trump has not yet had successes in the economic sphere. Like he's done some things that seem to me very risky in the economic sphere. The tariffs, right? We've talked about ways in which those aren't, it's not clear to me like whether those will succeed in the long term. But one way or another, like you've got to get these things on these kitchen table issues under control next. Because the Democrats, and I will shut up after this. I didn't think I had a lot to say about this, but it turns out I do. The Democrats, like, there's all this talk about will they moderate or will they Mamdanify? And I keep saying to my nice, like moderate liberals, it would be great. Like most people who vote Democrat would probably like to see the party moderate. They would like the party to get back into the conversation about who can appeal to the center. They want to see like, Josh Shapiro become the face of the party as opposed to Karine Jean-Pierre or Kamala Harris. It would be great if that were to happen. I think they can't. I don't think it's about whether they want to moderate or like how they could moderate or who could be their leader. I actually think it is structurally impossible because of the momentum on the AOC and the Mamdani side, because of the sheer charisma disparity between those people and like Skeletor, who just retired. Nancy Pelosi is doddering her way off the stage finally, and Schumer's not much better. Andrew Cuomo is like a complete non-starter in New York. Um, a dreadful candidate in every sense of the word. So there's that dimension of it. And there's the fact that rhetorically, the radical progressives have already captured the Democrat Party. Like that battle has already been won. And like guys like Ezra Klein don't seem to have realized this, that like they've lost the control of the party. And if they want to get it back, they have to mount like a serious offensive. Because otherwise what you're left with is like a bunch of statements that all these so-called moderates made in 2020 about how on board they were with the most insane progressive ideas, with like men can be women, and you have people like Malcolm Gladwell being like, well, actually, I didn't really mean that. I was just kind of scared. And it's like, okay, buddy, but like you said that anybody who disagreed with this, the implication of this platform was that anyone who disagreed was not only wrong, but literally a murdering fascist totalitarian pig, and you made people kind of believe that and act that way. And now you're just going to be like, oops, just kidding, and walk that back. Like we care about egg prices now. I don't like, there's too much cognitive dissonance, even for American politics in that. And I do not see the like meaningful path back to a Democrat Party that talks like most people in a sane way that connects directly to like kitchen table issues. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just think it doesn't matter that Mamdani probably can't play outside of New York. He is the future.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have. What do you think, Mike? I mean, there's no. I don't see how they reform themselves either, and there's a similarity here between a generational shift on the right as well.
Mm-hmm.
You're really talking about, kind of the olds on the left and right just being a completely different universe in terms of the framework of how they see everything, and then the young being a completely other different universe. And those are the people, by the way, ultimately who are going to fight each other.
Right.
The meme wars presage, what the parties are going to look like in the future and how they're going to fight each other. But I don't think I necessarily disagree with any of that. I mean, I don't think they can reform. We haven't seen any. It's an experiment that never been tried. With this moderate Democrat, or we're going to go back. And to tell the truth, Republicans are lucky that it's an experiment that never been tried to have a normal Democrat and not let lunatics run the asylum, because it gives them a good shot of retaining power.
No, I think Republicans are lucky just in terms of Trump, especially. I mean, look at who his opponents are. So I think, there's kind of the strategy of, do you let them just sit back and just, light themselves on fire, or what do you do to kind of just kind of push them over to the edge? Is it some kind of accelerationist thing? I don't know, but no, Matt, I think you're really getting at something, which is, there's a huge generational shift happening right now. You see just tectonic plates shifting. You just saw 2 board members of ISI resign, and you read their statement. And it's just pining for the days that were pining for Reagan, pining for the 1980s. And it's like there's just a complete lack, in my view, of understanding our times, understanding our political and cultural moment. And this is just going to keep happening. I mean, especially if, going from the boomers to a guy like J.D. Vance in 2028, who's, for right now, the heir apparent, you're going to see that just more and more and more, these fissures opening up. You're going to see boomers getting more and more angry at what they see as some, rejection of conservative principles, whatever that even means. You're going to see accelerate, more and more and more in the years coming.
And that's what you see on the left is, AOC doesn't agree with Chuck Schumer on much at all, and that's the fight.
That ISI thing, this is completely off the cuff because I really am not in the weeds or privy to any background information. And I should say, what I'm about to say does not in any way represent an official statement of the Claremont Institute. It's just me kind of spitballing. But they were mad because Johnny Burtka had Curtis Yarvin on with Chris Rufo. Chris Rufo is somehow tainted now by the stain. As we discussed last week, nobody is more determined that Nick Fuentes should not define the future of the Republican Party than I am. I do think there's a meaningful fight to be had within the younger coalition of the right wing to ensure that it not become dominated by this Jew-hating sort of sniveling madness, because that's a political loser too. And so I'm all on board with that fight. But it seemed like that ISI board member had just leapt upon this to umbrella this enormous group of people. Patrick Deneen is now canceled. Deneen, again, I'm not a post-liberal, I'm sort of let's do America, and it's not left liberalism, but it does have liberalism of a sort in it, et cetera, et cetera. But Patrick Deneen is not angry, monarchist troll or whatever he's. Anyway, so yes, that does, just to say, it does seem like the fallout from that kind of kerfuffle that happened is now ongoing, and there will be a lot of repositioning.
I'm sorry, Spencer, but anyone I don't like as a boomer is Nick Fuentes.
Right.
But I think that there's by the way, there's no MAGA or anything good without base boomers, but I don't want to get into generational things, but you do see. So what you see is Fuentes being used, right, as a cudgel to for everyone who's sort of dissatisfied with MAGA Maha and where things have gone. And you have some people who actually are, have real concerns about what's going on with Fuentes or Tucker or whatever. And then you have a lot of other people who just have grievances because they've been sitting there for 10 years and they've hated Trump the whole time. And they're very upset with what's going on. But sometimes they might have great points, but the problem is it just is apparent from what they wrote on Twitter that in their statement. And I will say, not like I know exactly what happened, but I do have some background knowledge on some of this or sources or whatever. And multiple. And they're just so out of touch. They don't understand how to describe the world. Like you said, it's like all this stuff I don't like is related, and it just shows it reduces their case. It makes it laughable, and it makes a response like I saw to their letter online where someone just said, "Too long didn't read. I'm sorry this happened to you."
or glad or happy for you.
Right.
Right, and it does. I mean, and that stuff is only fuel to Fuentes. By the way, right? This is the other thing that I will say. Like as an anti-Fuente, as a member of the anti-Fuentes side of the young right, like the version of an attack on Fuentes that goes like everyone I don't like is a groiper, um, is exactly the kind of thing that gives Fuentes like credibility. Like that's so it's completely counterproductive on top of everything else. We're running out of time, but Matt, I want to ask you about this Blaze story. Um, so this is kind of one of the uh, like enduring. This is a very strange story, like an interesting kind of mystery. Um, and maybe you can help me puzzle it through because I guess for ever since January 6th, there has been this unresolved mystery of who planted these pipe bombs at the DNC and near the RNC building the night before the January 6th riot. I think I'm getting this right. And this is one of the things that like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and the Trump FBI sort of decided they were going to reopen and reinvestigate. Now I read in the Blaze that there's this former Capitol Police officer who she's not, so far as I know, a suspect in the case, right? She's somebody that the Blaze has been looking into, and there's been this like kind of they're using gait analysis, which is to say they're sort of, like looking at footage of people walking of the they have some footage of the person planting the bombs walking, and then also footage of this woman Shawnee Kirchhoff, and there's a match there, but no like charges have been brought as of yet. I mean, tell me kind of what this story is, if you would, because I think it's like kind of amazing that there's still this giant open question, and I also think it's one of these things that's very in the weeds that maybe like even our listeners don't know that much about.
Yeah, and it's I'm here at the Claremont Fellowships, like you said, with the sheriffs, which is incredible. It's always a white pill. Makes you feel like there's actually hope for America when you meet some of these gentlemen and women as well here today. So this is an incredible event. But my life, and I actually haven't publicly announced this yet, but I will soon. I've left Blaze Media as well after.
You heard it here at the American Mind first.
Heard it here first after an incredible 2.5 years. And, one of the things that I did was hire Steve Baker, who wrote this story, and Joe Hanneman, who was at the Epic Times, who co-wrote this story, and Chris Bedford, who is the editor-in-chief mentioned in the story, not me. So everyone knows it's awful suspicious that 2 pipe bombs were put outside of both parties' headquarters at a significant time during the day on January 6th. They were discovered at a time in which many Capitol police officers were called away to the bombs, which further depleted the sources at the Capitol itself. But we are years later, people, and we don't have, a suspect. And of course, the right is upset because we have gone after thousands of, grandmas and everyone else who was at January 6th, but we don't really have a suspect, at least that we know of, that the FBI is looking at when it comes to this. So I just want to lay out what Baker has found because everyone is wrangling about this right now, and it's important. So there is this woman that you mentioned. I'm just going to throw out some facts of what I think I do know about this story. There's a Capitol police officer who, after her tenure at the Capitol Police, post January 6th, gets a job with the CIA doing security with a gun, campus security, whatever that means. So that's not a normal thing. Like, it's not a lot of Capitol police officers go from being a Capitol police officer to the CIA. Just throw it out. It's not a normal thing, right? And she does this after January 6th. That's not like a normal, I mean, some people regard them as kind of Keystone Cops. It's very political. It's a very strange sort of body that in some ways is very powerful because they guard very powerful people. But they're also sort of kept by that fact, right? If you're guarding people in Congress all the time who are powerful, that prevents you from, regardless, most people's career path doesn't go from Capitol Hill Police to CIA. Okay, number one. Number two, she's one of three people in the crow's nest, so-called crow's nest, above the crowd. And she fires non-lethal rounds with two other people into the crowd in a way that really starts or aggravates things and turns it into a riot. This is notable on the history of that day because these non-lethal rounds, if you go to their website of the companies that make these non-weapon weapons, they say you should never be shooting this at the upper body, never mind the head of people. Otherwise, it can be not so non-lethal, right? So you're supposed to shoot either the ground or people's legs. They were shooting into the crowd from above, like into their head. And of course, when they started hitting people on the head with these, it caused a reaction in the crowd. There's other facts about her that day that I don't think are public yet, but will come out that I've seen behind the scene that are verified. But let's just put it this way. She was one of the people who fired into the crowd causing the riot. And then we have the fact she's the same height and has the same, somewhat rare, I mean, these aren't facts that prove anything, sneakers as the pipe bomber in the footage. But there's something odd about the way the pipe bomber walks. And this woman, the reason gait analysis or analysis of how she walks came into it is that is a thing that law enforcement does do using, especially now, sophisticated digital methods. They look at gait or how you walk, and they can tell. I mean, it's not as good as what they do with your face at the airport, but they can tell who you are. Okay, this comes in with her because this same woman, right? The police officer who goes to the CIA after January 6th. She was in soccer in college. She had a pretty brutal accident and has a slight but distinct limp because of it. She's a very unique gait. Gait analysis came into it, okay, and it looks like she is a 94% match. You add human intelligence to that, and that goes upwards maybe to 98% if you just do what normal law enforcement people do with this, what Steve had done. So you got, okay, so I'm going to run through this, and I'm going to add one last fact. Same height, same build, same sneakers. Gait is odd, but also matches to a high degree using the most sophisticated stuff you can do by people in government. And then you got the fact that she was, shooting people, crow's nest. She goes to the CIA after January 6th, which is very odd. How many other times has that happened? And then throw on to this that she happens to live right next to. She is the next door neighbor of a guy who was a suspect because he bought the Metro card that the pipe bomber used. Go to DC and back.
Right. So two questions, again, kind of in real time. One, are there any other plausible suspects? Like, is this the only person currently suspected of being the pipe bomber? Are there other people? And then two, this is all very interesting, as you say, also circumstantial. So what would be the thing that you, as an architect of the story, would hope? Are you hoping that the FBI now kind of launches a formal investigation? Because to me, the question that arises instantly is okay, this is a major mystery, and a huge unanswered question surrounding a vastly significant national event. What is the FBI doing about it? Besides tossing out $500,000 and saying, "Bring us what you can," do we know what kind of investigation is ongoing or not? Is that just you can't say?
I think that there's a lot of people who question what the hell is going on at the FBI, what they are doing, and what they're focusing on. I don't question that Dan Bongino, for instance, wants to find the answer to these questions. but there are increasingly serious questions about what the FBI is doing, what its plan is, who is the suspect. Now, I'll tell you, there's a lot of people who have speculated about various people who were there that day and have various thoughts about who the pipe bomber is. Some people say, no, it wasn't planted on January 5th. It really was January 6th. So this is all, rabbit hole. You get a lot of people who are in the J6 space. I don't want to go, way into this, but who are attacking this story. And I mean, I think the story is remarkable because you have, an incredible amount of coincidences and at least a person of interest. I mean, if it was 75%, she'd be a person of interest.
If she were a Jan 6, rioter, she would certainly have been under Biden a person of interest. That's like
what should happen is very clear, right? She should be brought in for questioning, and if they, and focused on, and then your goal with her would be to turn her to say, look, we have determined, you need, if you tell us what you know, assuming that she did know something and she was involved. If that was true, you would try to flip her and work your way up the chain. I think there's a lot of people, rightly or wrongly, who are so cynical about where we're at right now that they don't think that the FBI has the willpower to do that. I hope that's not the case. I would like to see, I'd like to see something from them about this, and there's been nothing, and there's been nothing from her. So you would assume, if she thinks this is all wrong, et cetera, she put out a statement and say, maybe she will, and maybe she say, I'm going to sue the crap out of all of you, and you're wrong, or the FBI would say, something other than we're looking into this. But I think that the overarching truth is people are a little sick of the FBI saying that we're going to look into this. And they're a little sick of a lot of what's been going on because no one gets punished. There's no answers. And on we go. So I will say that I do know Steve Baker. And I think he's put a lot of work into this over the years. I think that there's a lot more to this story that, hasn't been published yet. And I don't know why people would attack, these sorts of questions that, again, a lot of it's circumstantial, but it's very disturbing fact pattern. And the fact that, some of these, Kyle Serafim is quoted in the article, and he's controversial because he's belligerent as hell. He's a pissed off, right, suspended FBI agent who doesn't take no for an answer and says whatever the hell he wants online. So that being stipulated, right, that's who he is. I mean, he says, and I believe this. I believe this is true. He was stationed outside this house, the house right next to the woman Steve is talking about, and he was pulled off of that case by the FBI of the suspect who was living next door because he had bought the Metro card the pipe bomber used. So this is all very odd stuff.
Yeah, I mean, at that 1,000-foot level, that is the part of it that it's the sort of Angelo Codavilla point, I guess, right, from of old, that this is like I like I said, having just kind of woken up this morning and opened the lid on all of this, am not going to make any revelatory comments that will solve this case forever. But the contextual kind of frame of it, which is that we've devoted who knows how many public resources and attention to hunting down the rioters in January 6th. In some cases, I think rightly under the full force of the law. In other cases, quite extravagantly as part of a political show trial. And yet there are still these just huge open questions. And it does not seem to have solved things for Trump to have taken over the FBI, right? To have put his people in charge or to put his people in charge of the FBI. That in itself is kind of, as we're having this conversation, I'm filing this under, giant structural problems alongside shutting down the government every 5 minutes. That perhaps it's hard to know what to do about it. But
yeah, and it's like this is a very difficult problem, and I've given I try to give a lot of grace when I was at Blaze on the show there, and in our content on for Cash and Dan Bongino, because this is an incredible task. Cleaning the Aegean stables, everyone there. It's like my analogy is always the same. The Royal Navy gives you a pirate ship that they took over. And it's like the three of us on the show are in the captain's quarters when they gave us the ship, but it's still all run by pirates who hate us. And what the first thing that happens is that one of them comes up and knocks on the door and says, "Hey, Spencer, Mike, you guys, I'm so glad you're here. So glad you're here. I know all the bodies are buried. I'm going to help you. It's about time. I'm just happy you're here." And that person is probably not the good guy. Because that's how they've survived. This is how bureaucrats survive for decades, and they're very good at that. And so there's 1,000 games they can play. So this is a very difficult task. But I guess I'm a little concerned about where's the plan, and then I'm seeing a lot of activity that that Cash seemed to be against. Before happen now. I do think that's potentially a problem, or at least an optics problem. And people just need to know what the plan is and have confidence in it again. And, we're just not there yet. And so with this story, it's wild to me how everyone just starts attacking it when this is a bunch of weird stuff. Like, it's pretty serious, it's a bunch of weird, facts that are all there about this woman where there's something here. There's a thread that needs to be pulled, for sure. And I think we live in a time in which people don't have the confidence that the government will pull that thread.
Probably another one to be revisited down the line would be my guess. This is every now and then we have a conversation and like, well, this is going to probably return to our attention at some point. So to be discussed further, we got to wrap this up because I notionally at least have a plane to catch. Who knows? We'll see. But in any case, let's hit some quick cultural recommendations. I told Ryan on our internal call yesterday that it's a shame he's not on the pod because my cultural rec is directly aimed straight at him. Since we share a weird white man's obsession with Japan. But hopefully we're not the only ones, and there are some listeners out there who count also as weebs or other forms of Japan enthusiasts. Jonathan Clement's A Brief History of the Samurai. I was out in, as Charles Kessler calls it, the People's Republic of New York last week for the CRB Gala. A great time was had by all. And shortly before we opened the doors, I went on a little stroll to the Strand, one of the great bookstores in the world, and certainly probably the great bookstore in New York. They have these outside stalls, and I found this sitting on a table, thought, looks perfect. Not only is it just a, insane history, like Shogun, the TV show or the book Shogun, it is the only thing about it that it falls short for me is that it's fictional when the realities here might as well be a potboiler plain read. It's such an insane. I mean, starting from the Nippongi, the ancient chronicle, the oldest chronicle of Japanese history, going back to the formation of the world from a cosmic egg, up to the Tale of Genji. Some people consider it the world's first novel, through the palace intrigues of the various emperors and shoguns and the Tokugawa shogunate. And it's just there's so much there. And this guy opens the book saying it's always heartbreaking to write a book like this because you have to cut so much out. However, the last thing I'll say about it is a masterclass in writing an actual brief history of a huge and sprawling subject. Enviable for those of us that do something like this for a living, to see a guy really bring expertise to bear and condense it into a readable 300 pages. A Brief History of the Shogunate of the Samurai. Sorry, A Brief History of the Samurai. Jonathan Clements. It's great. Go check it out. What do you guys got?
So I'm not sure if I can actually fully recommend this because I'm only 2 episodes in, but Vince Gilligan, his new show, Pluribus, is now up at Apple Plus. And so this was the guy behind Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul. He, I know, directed some episodes of The X-Files and wrote some episodes of there too. I'm big fan of all those shows. So this one's really, it's got a very interesting premise, and I'm very interested to see where it goes. Basically, astronomers kind of discover this signal coming from outer space, 600 million light years away, and it's actually like a DNA strand, and they kind of create it. And what it actually is a virus that actually takes over, basically the world, kills off like 800 million people, and everybody kind of becomes this Borg like kind of continuum where everybody's speaking the same. You can have access to anyone's specific knowledge, but there are only 12 people, along with the central character, who have not been affected so far by it. So there's humor in it. It's pretty fascinating, very early on. So it'll be interested to see where this goes. I think there's going to be 9 episodes for the first season. And then I think it's already signed on for a second season too as well. So I'm very interested just to see where Gilligan takes us.
I love this part of the show because these are both things that I'm writing down the name.
Yeah. I've taken a lot of the other guys' recs throughout, and they're always
me too.
And this is like, I know I'm going to watch this show just because of who's making it already. So that's exciting. I just 2 things briefly. I started, again, it's not a full recommendation, but if it depends, listen, if this sounds interesting, watch it. Have you guys heard of King and Conqueror? It's BBC. It premiered on BBC One. It's on Amazon, I believe. And it's one of these things where I was just kind of looking for something, which is pretty rare for me, by the way. I haven't been up on the TV upstairs in like months, Yeah. So it's called King and Conqueror, and it is about William the Conqueror. And
I do think I've heard of this. Okay, this sounds awesome.
So this is 1066, and it has its sort of cheesy like weaving things together a little bit too neatly for television drama kind of thing, but there's some really good performances, I think, at least so far. I'm almost done. I'm like 75% in by the 2 main characters. And it's just interesting that it was made. Like, it's about these 2 white guys who may become king like a long time ago. I didn't think you're supposed to make things about this. And
it's the vibe shift.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's got like, the whole, it puts you right back into, is it historically accurate? Of course not. But does it have some truth to it? Maybe. More importantly, does it make you want to find out more? Do you want to know more after you watch it? And the answer is yes. So I find it just interesting it was made, and I was kind of digging that. We'll see how it ends. Now, if you know anything about 1066, you kind of know how it ends.
With us speaking the language we now speak, yes, I do.
But I will say, even though this is not like some kind of Shakespearean level, drama or production, I'm really sad because I do know the end already, and that's good. I feel something about this, even though it's not, again, like, I wouldn't say it's high art, but it's pretty interesting, and I find it kind of thing like I like to watch. And then the second thing is, I'll just be like what I brought with me, W. David Marx's book, Status and Culture. Have you guys ever heard of this book? I think I read like half of it, maybe a little while ago, a couple years ago. But I just picked it up again, and the Status and Culture, it's very thoughtful, I think, or at least a good way to help you think about some of these issues, whether you agree with them or not, about how culture is very much related to status. And about how it reminds me of some of the books about mass media, of the last 100 years, where people are trying to get it, how you influence people for real, and how people move about the cabin. So there's something interesting about that book, and I hope to actually. I don't think I finished it last time. I was like, this is kind of interesting, and then just went by the wayside. But doing that too.
I liked Rob Henderson has this thing about luxury beliefs, and he posted the other day, if we still had official markers of class and culture and status in our civilization, then luxury beliefs would evaporate because you wouldn't need them. You'd get to wear a funny hat or something if you were upper class. All right, I really do got to go. So thank you all for listening to the Roundtable. If you like this show, you will love the writing that we publish at The American Mind, AmericanMind.org. Also, our sister publication, the Claremont Review of Books, aforementioned in its 25th year, ClaremontReviewBooks.com. Check out our DC-based Center for the American Way of Life at dc.claremont.org. And donate to support us. We would love that at claremont.org/donate. We're very, very grateful for the donations that keep the lights on, both large and small. Thanks, as always, to our production crew, the brothers G, Jake, and Ryan Gannon. Don't forget to rate, review, share, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Let people know about the show. And thanks very much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.